Hi folks, the Great Gazoo, who remembers him? My favorite character on the Flintstones. So, today's topic. I feel like Bob and Doug McKenzie. Do you know that reference? Maybe nobody's probably getting any of my references today, but maybe you'll get this reference. My topic today is the Lankavatara Sutra. There it is. You can kind of see it there. I received this back in the far future year 2011, I think, because it says published or for publication in February 2012. This was from Counterpoint Press, and they wanted me to give a blurb for it, which I believe I did, but I only have the uncorrected, whatever it's called, the advanced copy version. I don't think they ever sent me the final version with my blurb on it, so but I have to admit, and I've said this before, when I gave the blurb to this, I hadn't read the entire book, and that's because you don't really need to read an entire book in order to decide, or at least I don't feel like I need to, whether it's good enough to give a blurb to. I read the introduction and maybe the first 2 chapters, and thought, well, this is very well done, and this is exactly what it says it is. A really good translation by Red Pine Bill Porter of the Lankavatara Sutra, and if you want to get the Lankavatara Sutra for yourself and read it, this is the one to get, I think. Or the Suzuki version is good too, but this one's more readable and more detail. At least I only have the Suzuki version in this, which doesn't include the entire thing, but at least this is a little easier than the DT Suzuki's version, and there really aren't. I don't know if there are any. I think there's a couple others around, but this is a real good one. Now, the reason I'm reviewing it now, I'm 8 years later, 9 years later, anyway, a long time later, because I finally finished it. I decided to read it. I read it from cover to cover recently and finished it now. I don't know when I started, a month ago or 2 months ago or 3 months ago. The thing is, this is a tough book. So my saying it was a good and high quality translation and all that, I stand by that, but this is a difficult book. This is really a brain twister to try to get through, and I think that's no fault of Red Pine. It's just the nature of the sutra itself is really, really difficult. This sutra is said to be the one sutra that Bodhidharma brought with him from India when he relocated to China and bequeathed to his student Huiko, I think is the guy's name, and yeah, Huiko. And it is supposed to be a foundational text for the Zen sect of Buddhism. Now, one thing about sutras and why Bodhidharma only had one is you got to remember back in those days you couldn't just go into Barnes and Noble. You can probably go into Barnes and Noble and buy this if they're a well-stocked Barnes and Noble, but back then you couldn't go to like a store and just get a sutra, or order it from online somewhere. They were rare and hard to come by, and if you got one, you treated it well and kept it well, and you might have only had one. That's the way it went. But this came up, the Lankavatara Sutra came up. I can't get the flash off that. Lankavatara Sutra came up in my conversation with Stephen Batchelor last weekend, briefly. And he was mentioning that Zen's 2 foundational texts are the Prajnaparamita Hridaya Sutra, or the general Prajnaparamita Sutras. There's a whole kind of collection of them, of which the Diamond Sutra is one, which I talked about a while ago, the Red Pine's translation of that. And, of course, the Heart Sutra, which I just said, the Prajnaparamita Hridaya Sutra, which is the real short sutra, which has the thing form is emptiness, emptiness is form. And what Stephen Batchelor said at the time was that from the Hridaya Sutra, from the Heart Sutra, is the teaching of emptiness, and the Lankavatara Sutra is the teaching of mind only. So those 2 ideas are kind of foundational in the philosophy of Zen. And, yeah, this is definitely a sutra that really gets into that whole idea of mind only. And one of the things that Stephen Batchelor said this weekend was that he feels, we were talking about God and the concept of God and how that fits in, because that's sort of a point we have together. He rejects the whole idea of God, and I sometimes use the whole idea of God, and we talked about that. But he was saying that he felt that this teaching of mind only, that the mind is the foundational thing of the universe, is the first step on a slippery slope to God, you know. So it's like you remove the concept of a personalized God, and then you abstract it more and more and more, and you get to, well, I was going to say finally you get to, but maybe it's not final, but eventually you get to mind as a way of talking about something that's relatively close in some ways to a more mystical concept of God, but doesn't include the personalization aspect, you know, the old guy with the beard on the throne who's a male and so forth and so on, that people, you know, kind of react to. But mind is a little bit more neutral, but he didn't like even the idea of mind. You know, this is a whole subject matter that I'm kind of interested in, and I like talking about, because I feel like it's hard for me to know exactly what Stephen Batchelor's whole philosophy is. I mean, I've read a couple of his books, but it's been a while since I read any of his books. But it seems to be like a total rejection of any sort of conceptualization of anything ultimate. And I understand that, and that's certainly in line with Buddhism, especially early Buddhism. You know, the earliest Buddhist, Buddha himself and some of his early followers definitely rejected all attempts to say anything about the ultimate. Later Buddhism kind of walks that back a little and starts saying, well, maybe we can say something about the ultimate, you know, about the absolute. Kobun Chino prefers to use that word, the absolute. There's other people who prefer different words. Some people use the word God. Nishijima Roshi sometimes use the word God. I never heard him say the absolute or anything like that. Dogen talked about mind, Xin, or Xin, I think you say in Chinese, which is a Chinese character that can mean either mind or heart. But it's one of these concepts. So anyway, let me tell you about this book. I've spent 7 minutes not telling you about the book. Having finished it, I would say that, let's see, the one thing that in the intro that characterizes the book really well is, I'll read you the sentence that Bill Porter or Red Pine said in this. The Lanka, which means the Lankavatara Sutra, the Lanka is not a text that welcomes the casual reader. An understanding of its teaching requires a teacher or incredibly good karma. And teachers in karma have always been rare. That's true. I think if you're looking for an introductory text or something just sort of fun to read, or, you know, you kind of go, wow, that's so enlightening or whatever, this is probably not. This is really scholarly stuff. And one of the things I was noticing when I decided to do this video is, after having read the whole sutra, I felt like, you know, when coming time to prepare the video, that what I really needed to look at was the introduction and this nice glossary that it contains at the back. Now, I have the, what is it called? The Advanced Galley, and it doesn't include the Chinese characters, which is a shame, and I might actually go and order a real copy, or maybe if somebody from Counterpoint Press is listening and can send me the copy that has my blurb on it. That'd be lovely to have. Because it doesn't include the Chinese characters, which I like having, but it defines all the terms that are used in the book, and that's kind of what the book does. It just uses all these weird terms. So since I spent some time this morning writing notes, I'm going to give you a little bit of a rundown. I don't know how worthwhile this is, so I'll preface this by saying you don't really need to know this stuff. I don't think that if you want to have the full experience of Zen practice and even so-called enlightenment, you know, if we want to even go there and use that terrible word, you don't need to know this stuff. It isn't like a building blocks of knowledge that enlightenment comes to you after you've learned all the knowledge about the theories about it. But the theories about it are interesting because they are theories of, you could say psychology, but it's not psychology in the Western sense. It's psychology that's based on an idea, a non-materialistic idea. You know, psychology, Western psychology, is based mostly, I think, on the idea that our mind is in here. You know, our mind can be defined as the stuff, the meat that's right in this part of my body. The Buddhists look at concepts that we would often characterize as being parts of psychology, but from a point of view that doesn't posit that the mind is in here, that the mind is the actions of this lump of meat and blood and stuff. So it's kind of interesting to see some of these ideas. And a lot of it comes from the Yogacara philosophy. So this sutra spends a lot of time talking about Tathagata Garbha, which is the womb of the Buddhas. And that's a concept that Tim used to talk about a lot. He was real interested in this Tathagata Garbha. That's why I can rattle it off so easily, because I would hear him say Tathagata Garbha, you know, and I'd go, oh, Tathagata Garbha, that's interesting. And it's okay. Let's give you the short version. I did this in a video about a year or some ago of the Alaya Vijnana, the Yogacara philosophy of mind, which is that they divide the mind into 7 forms of consciousness, or 8, and that's where the Tathagata Garbha thing comes in. So the 7 forms are, they consider the 5 senses to be 5 consciousnesses. So there's eye consciousness, or seeing consciousness, hearing consciousness, tasting consciousness, smelling consciousness, and touch consciousness. I think that's more or less it. So that's 5. That's the first 5. So each one is a different consciousness. So that breaks from the Western idea of understanding what consciousness is right there. So right from the start of it, you know, you're already in another world. The 6th form is Manovijnana, which is what I guess in Western concepts you'd call the mind, is the way we think of it. Conceptual consciousness, it reifies the 5 sensory forms of consciousness into conceptual constructs. It's your you know, your thinking mind. Manas is the 7th form, which is will or self-consciousness, and that's your whole sense of being a personal self. Then you have Alaya Vijnana, which Red Pine calls repository consciousness, but most people call storehouse consciousness, which contains the remains of projections, which are thoughts, words, and deeds, and a seedbed of further projections. And that whole idea of projections is important because they say, or the Lankavatara Sutra says, that everything we see, hear, smell, taste, think about, touch, whatever, experience in the world is a projection of mind, and it is fundamentally unreal. So the Alaya Vijnana contains the seed of those projections, and then you have at the top of it the number 8 one, Tathagata Garbha, the womb of the Buddhas, which is the same as Alaya Vijnana, but free of projections. It is also the same as Dharmakaya, or the Dharma body, which the Dharma body says that I am the entire universe. So my Dharma body and your Dharma body and Ziggy's Dharma body is everything. So everything in the visible universe or invisible universe is Dharma body. And the Dharma body is the visible version of the Tathagata Garbha. It's the same as Alaya Vijnana, but free of projections. But Red Pine, in his what do you call it, glossary, says at the end of his definition of Tathagata Garbha, it is ultimately a palliative for those who are terrified of no self. Palliative is one of those big words that I hardly ever use, but I guess it's something they give you to make you feel good if you're too scared to jump into the realm of just complete non-self or emptiness. So what this sutra does is it gives you a lot of technical stuff about the Buddhist concepts of mind and all that, but it also tells you that, by the way, none of this is true. This is just provisional stuff, and really it's all just emptiness. And so it's pretty nutty stuff, if you want nutty stuff. Another little bit that I learned from reading this is ayatanas, which are the 5 powers of sensation and their domains, and the 6th domain is the domain of thought. It's just a technical word. And dhatus, which are the types of consciousnesses, which I just told you about: eye consciousness, ear consciousness, smell consciousness, etc., like that. Nice to learn those words. And another term that I picked up on here that I just thought was interesting is Ichantikas. It's not something that is invented in the Lankavatara Sutra, but it's a term that gets used in it, and it is a being, a person usually, who is so addicted to pleasure and the pleasures of the senses and the sensory realm, that they'll just never get it. They'll never get enlightened. And apparently there is a debate among Buddhists, these scholar Buddhists, who on the one hand say that everybody is fundamentally enlightened no matter who you are or how bad you are, and then they have this category of the Ichantikas who are just like hopeless, who just can't get it because they're so addicted to pleasure and things like that. My take on Ichantikas would be, it's like a rich and powerful person. A rich and powerful person is going to have almost no chance of ever understanding the truth. And that could include the truth with a capital T, like the big truth, because they're so addicted to their riches and power that they can't understand the truth, or even truth with a small case t, a lowercase t, because who's going to tell them the truth? Because they're rich and they're powerful, and it's difficult for those people to ever learn the truth. And while reading this, I was thinking about some of the wealthy people I have encountered in my life in the film business and a little bit in this business. And I understand that they never know what's true. I talked to some very wealthy rock star a few years ago, a few times, about spiritual matters and so forth, and I could always feel that there was this feeling in him, like he didn't want to be taken advantage of, or he didn't want me to ask him for stuff. And the fact is, it's not that these ideas never popped into my mind, because I'm a human being, and it does pop into my mind occasionally, like, wow, this guy could just buy me a Zen center if he wanted to, if he just felt like it, and it probably wouldn't even dent his wallet at all, to just buy, to buy a new Zen center for us. But I'm not going to ask him for that. I'm not gonna try to get that out of him, and that's not why I was talking to him. But of course, that occurred to me, and the fact that it occurred to me, puts a barrier between us. And I felt like I'm pretty lucky that I never reached that level. I wanted to reach that level at one time in my youth. I was trying to become a famous rock and roll star, and working at it, put out albums and all that stuff. And I'm lucky that I was unsuccessful, because if I'd been successful, then if I'd encountered a spiritual teacher after that, I would not have been able to trust that teacher, because I'd always be like looking over my shoulder. And it's funny, this particular rock star, I later read, he stopped contacting me after a while, and I later read that he got into this other form of spirituality, which I recognize as being one of these meditation forms that really goes after the rich, powerful celebrities. It's TM, by the way, if you want to know. I'll be cagey about it. Transcendental meditation. And they really target the rich and the powerful. They're always trying to get the rich, powerful people to be in their group, and they managed. They almost got the Beatles, but they didn't quite get them. But that was the first one they shot for. Now they've got a few celebrity endorsees out there, and I thought, they know how to do it. They know how to trick these people into believing that they're not after them, but they are. It's so obvious. Anyway, whatever. Sorry if I'm insulting the TM people out there, but that's what you guys are like. Anyway, if you want to make me as rich and powerful as rock stars and TM, send me some money, because that's the only way I get money. I'm not getting money from I don't know, big spiritual organizations or record companies or anything like that. I'm getting money from you guys out there. So that's my main way of making a living, and I really appreciate your support. As always, if you're having financial difficulties or something, don't give me any money, because I'm not desperate and going, I'm going to drown if I don't get any money. But it is my main means of support, so I do thank those of you who keep on donating, because it really helps. It is really how I am buying dog food and bananas and I don't know, whatever else I get to eat, and my rent and everything. So thank you very much. See you next time. Have a good time all the time. Later. Bye.